Very nice.
Oh, I'm loving the person from Cambridge who's got loungewear and Lion King slippers on right now. Which reminded me of Bryony, your chat with Jess Ennis the other week for your podcast, which was so funny when you said, Jess, what are you wearing? I love that.
Well, I did that. I do so like you guys are in what looks like studies, you know, and I'm really impressed with that. But I don't have a study, so I do all of my Zoom and all my work from my dressing table in my bedroom, which is where I'm from. And and so like I am wearing loungewear, you know. I put some mascara on for you though.
Thanks.
That's nice.
Yeah. Lucky there are no cameras. I'm already in my PJs. Well, that's totally fine. You'd be naked if you want. We can't see you. I mean,
oh, lovely. Well, I think we've got tons of attendees. It's hit 5 o'clock. Shall we introduce ourselves and get going to this marvellous session? So everybody on the call, welcome to Breaking the Bloody Barriers, Exercise, Stress, Nutrition and the Menstrual Cycle during Covid-19. I'm really, really thrilled to be joined by Bryony Gordon, award-winning Telegraph columnist, hello, author of new book, Glorious Rock Bottom, and award-winning mental health advocate and host of podcast Mad World, and just somebody generally that if you're not already following, don't know everything about, you should do, because she's brilliant. And thank you for joining us, Bryony.
Thanks for having me, Anna.
And of course, Dr. Georgie Bruinves, exercise physiologist at Oracle with a specific focus on female physiology. She's co-creator of the Fitter Woman app, which is a free app you can download to track your menstrual cycle and monitor your health. And Georgie will tell us more about that. What she didn't say in her bio that she sent me is that she also works with Chelsea women's team and the FA, and previously worked with the US women's national team. Yep, that is Megan Rapinoe, etc. During their World Cup winning campaign, which is incredibly cool. Love that about her. So before we get started and talking about periods, I just want to hear from you both a little bit about how you're coping with lockdown.
I'm so embarrassed. My door has just knocked because my husband's gone out without the key. So Georgie, you start.
Amazing. Also, Anna, we haven't had an intro from you, so it would be great for you.
Oh, sorry. Typical self-effacing women, isn't it? So editor of Telegraph Women Sport, we're so happy to be hosting this webinar with Georgie and Bryony. Really important conversations about menstruation that I think increasingly we are starting to have in sports media and in the wider media, which is just wonderful really, because it wasn't that long ago that periods were mentioned in sport. Well, actually, technically, it was Heather Watson. She talked about girl things at Wimbledon 2015. And sports media went into meltdown because sports media is mostly men. And the thought of having to write or talk about periods was, very troubling. But since then, we've come a long way, and we even had periods on the front page of the sports section in the Telegraph not long ago, thanks to Georgie. So yeah, I feel like culture is massively changing, and that's why it's great to have this chat today. So Georgie, tell us about lockdown.
So lockdown has been really interesting for me, actually. So I'm now working back at my parents' house, where I grew up, which is in the Surrey countryside, which is actually really, really nice. It is definitely adjusting to a new normal. I've had to, I quickly learned, Bryony, that I couldn't work in my bedroom because I felt like I'd just sit at my desk, then go to bed, then get up again and sit back at my desk again. So that's
what I do.
Yeah, that was
my family.
Yeah. So I've taken over my sister's bedroom, but from a work perspective, actually work at Oracle has been so busy, but in a completely different way. So again, adjusting to this new sense of normal. But for me, it's been really, really exciting, I would say, because suddenly I feel in the female athlete space, people have suddenly realized that why didn't I use this time to learn a bit more about my body? And coincidentally, menstrual cycles seem to have been just all over the place, which is why I guess, or a big reason behind me being really keen to do this today. Like I've seen so many people experiencing more symptoms or changes in cycle length or a missed period altogether. And I think in the elite athlete space, it's like using this time really proactively to actually say, hang on a minute, I'm a woman, but I don't like treat my training and my nutrition or like take the approach that actually I am a woman and what can I do about this to any of my daily life. So why don't I do this right now? So I'm seeing like loads of interest from that angle, which is really, really exciting, because I think finally people are stepping back and thinking actually health is really important right now, and like hormone health is a big part of that. So the long answer to your short question was that things are different, but good different in a way, bar the terrible things that are going on in the rest of the world. But yeah, I think it's positive moving forwards in terms of like supporting women out there.
That's great, thank you. Bryony, I'm desperate to know who was at the door.
Oh, it was my husband.
Oh, it was.
Oh.
My daughter. And yeah, I'm like, why didn't you take the keys out with you? But yes, it's all okay. They're back, they're in, and they know I'm doing a webinar being watched by 439 people.
Amazing.
Yeah, we've got Paw Patrol on lockdown downstairs, so hopefully the 4-year-old won't come up. Bryony, how is lockdown for you? How are you finding it? I know you wrote a column about the sort of positives about it and the little things that
it's really interesting. I found lockdown, I sort of love it and hate it both at the same time, and it seems to drag on and go really quickly both at the same time, and I'm discovering that's fine, and that's true for life a lot of the time. I have found that it has what Georgie said about it's a time to listen to your body, and I think that kind of the normal distractions of life have gone, and it's very hard to avoid lots of things, you know, things that I've perhaps been putting off doing. And I mean, from like really small practical things like rearranging the food cupboard or whatever, to like massive life decisions. You know, they're sort of staring me in the face now. So it's been a period of incredible, you know, self-discovery, if that doesn't sound too cheesy, but so yeah, I mean, I'm just getting on with it. I'm well, I'm not unwell. I actually did end up going to get a test on Monday because I've had a fever, right, and was feeling like whacked out, and so I went along because covering coronavirus, even from doing the podcast and talking to the nurses and stuff, I was eligible, and I thought if there's like loads of if there's like no tests available, I won't take it, because I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor. But they were literally like, we have 744 tests available right now, please come now. And then they were like, does everyone in the car want a test? Anyway, so I got tested, and I don't have coronavirus, but what I do think I have, and what I'm really noticing, is that I think I'm perimenopausal, and like the flushes, and yeah, I'm really noticing that my cycle, and you know, in a way that I wouldn't pay attention to it perhaps before. And I'm going to be 40 in a couple of weeks, and I know that my mum went through menopause quite early, so I'm really noticing that, like the physical feelings of my hormones, and in a way that I just ignored them before, you know.
So quick question, not to get too personal, so feel free not to answer this, but are you, like, do you know where you are in your menstrual cycle right now?
Right now, I'm probably about to ovulate.
Okay. So you were feeling, when you got feverish, where were you in your menstrual cycle then? Was it just a few days ago?
Yeah, it was a couple of days ago.
Okay, because I think like pre-menstrually, that wouldn't surprise you massively, and like in the second half of the menstrual cycle, your body temperature can increase a little bit, but if you're not at ovulation yet, I'd be surprised.
No, I mean, I think I've been a bit knocked down, but you know, it's like, it's listening to, you know, It is interesting. And the other day I had this thing where I was hoovering and the hoover fell down the stairs and I lost it. I was like, I can't believe this bleeping hoover. And I was like, wow, that really feels like I'm premenstrual, but I can't be premenstrual because I only finished my period the other day. And then I looked in my app and I was like, oh no, an entire menstrual cycle has gone and it's turned, and I didn't, is what I was talking about, the time going really quickly but slowly.
Yeah.
And everything feels a lot more pronounced, doesn't it?
Also though, your cycle could be elongated because of just the change in everything that's going on, like the change in stress, the change in routine, maybe change in sleep, homeschooling, like, and that's one of the massive things I've been seeing, like athletes whose cycles or women whose cycles have just like elongated and they're like, whoa, what happened there? Which is again like something which I think is so important to actually highlight, that while that's not normal, it's quite common at the moment.
But also it's really interesting, you were talking about exercise and how it changes your cycle, and everyone is exercising a lot more. And I remember when I run quite a lot, and
you were going to do the marathon, weren't you?
Well, it would have been I've done 2 marathons. So I did my first marathon in 2017, and then in 2018 I ran the London Marathon in my underwear to show that women of all shapes and sizes can do marathon. So I'm a curvier woman, like you can see I'm a size like 18 to 20. So me and a friend of mine who's a plus size model called Jada, we ran in our underwear and we raised like £20,000 for Heads Together, and it was like a huge thing, and we were on breakfast telly. And then last year we got 1,000 women running the Vitality London 10K in their underwear as well, women of all shapes and sizes and life experience. So women with cancer, women with lupus, older women, it was to say that this isn't about, for us, running isn't about, it's not about the losses, it's not about losing weight and losing inches around my waist, it's about the gains, it's about the mental clarity, it's about the way it makes me feel, not the way not the way it makes me look. And I was supposed to be doing the London Marathon a couple of weeks ago, but obviously it's been postponed till October. And then we were supposed to be doing the 10K with 3,000 women in their underwear. But that's been postponed as well. But so exercise is a big thing for me about the way I feel. But I remember my first marathon without, we are talking about periods here. I remember when I was training for it, I remember chatting to these 2 guys, Paul Tompkinson and Rob, I can't remember his surname, Deering, who do a podcast called The Run Pod. So they take you out and you run and you record the podcast while you're running together. And I remember they were like, they've done loads of marathons. And they were like, what questions do you have about doing a marathon? And I was like, what happens if I get my period? And they were like, we don't know. No one talks about that. And I remember the year before, a woman had run the London Marathon and she had not used any
products.
So she bled freely to show that this is what happens with women. And of course on the day before the marathon I got my period, and I remember just being like, oh my god. But it was like my body kind of went into a kind of like, right, it was the lightest period I've ever had. So I didn't have to like stop, every 10 meters as I do now when I've got my period. I'm like, should I be telling 474 people this?
You should be able to talk about this. So yeah.
Well, of course. And I remember no one did talk about it. Like there was no kind of like, what happens if you get your period? You've got to run 26.2 miles. And I remember getting to mile 19 and like feeling something in my leggings. And I realized it was like my sanitary towel had fallen down, and I was like, okay, I've given birth, I'm at mile 19, I don't care. And I just like pulled the sanitary towel out and just like threw it onto the roundabout. Luckily there was nobody like watching, it was one of the bits of the London Marathon, and I was like, fuck, like F this, like why are we not talking about this? Half the people doing this marathon are women, which means that like probably 12, I don't know what the percentage wise are like on their period, and yet it's like,
don't talk about that.
I love that you've referenced that woman who ran the marathon and free bled. That was Kieran Gandhi, who's the drummer for MIA, and there's loads of pictures of her all over the internet with leggings and her bleeding. But it was, yeah, it made global headlines at the time. It's a really big deal. Georgie, you talked a little bit about why you wanted to do this webinar today. Obviously on the app you've got some data about how women's cycles are changing at the moment, and we did an article with you where you said up to 45%, which I think is incredible. Up to 45% of the elite athletes you're working with have had their cycles affected by lockdown. Can you talk us through a bit about why that is? What are the factors?
Yeah, so for the reproductive system, so the way like hormones are released, which drives the menstrual cycle, for that to be like happy and healthy, there's a number of things that need to kind of be in place or be in a like good pattern, and that's like eating well. So not just what you eat, but when you eat and how much you eat. So to have like happy hormones, you need to be eating enough, eating regularly, and eating enough of the right things. You need to be sleeping well. So I would say, I mean, everyone's got a different kind of sleep need, but like fulfilling your body's sleep requirements. You also need to be manage, like your body needs to be able to manage the exercise that it's doing. So for example, if you suddenly increase your training load, you might then see a subsequent like delay in your next period, or it might affect the symptoms that you experience, or even your menstrual blood loss. So it might like decrease your blood loss, for example. The other big thing is stress. And we know that stress can have a couple of different effects on your menstrual cycle. So either it can suppress, so it can delay your next period. So as I was saying to you, Bryony, like it could be that the stress of this situation, which it is stressful, particularly for mums out there who are trying to help homeschool, they're suddenly working from home, or there might be financial stresses, like women are more likely to have been experienced or to have had pay cuts or job losses, I read, or just, you know, women deal differently to stressful situations than men, and actually women typically internalize them more, and that can have more of an impact on their body, on their physiology. So either stress can suppress the menstrual cycle, or actually it can exacerbate symptoms. So it can make the way we manage our symptoms, like, so our response to them like heightens. So I've had people saying they're in like gripping agony and they've suddenly got heavier bleeds than before, and that could be because any of those factors that I already said, so diet, sleep, training load, alcohol, like there's so many different things which all can contribute to a happy reproductive system. And whenever like any of those things go out of kilter, that can then offset the menstrual cycle. So I guess like my real reason for doing this is to firstly say to women that that's like, if your cycle is a bit crazy right now, that's not abnormal, but also why not use this time to be really proactive and actually think, hang on a minute, why didn't I try and like help myself and learn how I can help myself?
Can I say something, Georgie? It is fascinating because you mentioned that, because obviously on an evolutionary perspective, if a woman was going through huge amounts of life stress, and we're going right back to like the beginning of time and lions and, you know, yeah. Stress would presumably put the cycle off, so she couldn't produce a baby because it, you know, the time, you know, it would be a sign that the conditions were not right for pregnancy.
100%. It's your body's way of saying like, I can't have a baby right now, my body's not in a happy state, like literally bang on to your point.
Yeah, and it is, I think it's really important that we remember that like this is quite an extraordinary time. And I think already, and you know, humans are incredible at adapting, our brains will adapt to stuff, but I think it's really important to remember that it's quite, I mean, I hesitate to use the word traumatic because that sounds so dramatic, but it is a really it's a really extraordinary time, and so if we're all feeling a little bit crazy and our bodies are feeling a bit weird, and I've noticed in some of the questions people saying that they're lacking energy, or you know, and I totally get that, like everything feels more pronounced, do you know what I mean?
It's okay as well, and I think it's like, it's okay to feel like that. And I think like I love sports. I love watching sport, and I am like really missing. It's a big part of my life, and like, you know, seeing my friends, seeing my family. But actually, I've just got to realize that it's okay to bemoan the fact that I can't watch it, or I can't see my family, can't see my friends, but just try and like, we're all in this together. And I think particularly in with elite athletes or with women across the board, like realizing that, okay, if your menstrual cycle is like out of kilter, that's actually a really good sign that your body's just not quite happy right now. But don't panic about it. Just try and use this time to work out how you can help yourself, like what you can do to be proactive right now, without panicking. Because I've had like women reach out and say, oh my gosh, I haven't had a period, oh my gosh, it's so stressful, oh my gosh, am I pregnant? But like, I can't be pregnant, but maybe I am pregnant, and that just adds to the stress. So it's like a kind of spiral that can just keep going if we're not if we don't normalize it, really.
Bryony, you've got such a great community of women and conversations with women about all the different issues that affect us, whether it's sort of body image pressures or looking after kids or all those sorts of conversations. What do you think are the really sort of big challenges for women at the moment in this situation?
Oh, I mean, I think there's so many challenges, and I think the onus kind of does tend to fall on us. I really do want to reach out to the people that, you know, this is, I think also, and it's really interesting, like, to just go back to basics here, and regardless of lockdown or anything, we as women are brought up to believe, like, I don't know about you, and there may be many people in this webinar who weren't brought up to believe it, and their parents spoke to them in a healthy way about their menstrual cycle. But certainly I was sort of, you know, don't, like, the curse, do you know what I mean? Don't talk about it,
Yeah.
it'll make me mad. And, you know, and the thing of people like being embarrassed when a tampon rolls out of their handbag or out of their, and this is like bonkers. And what this does, and what this instills in us at a very early age, is that we should be somehow ashamed of our bodies. And without menstrual cycles, none of us would exist, right? We shouldn't be ashamed. This is the most amazing thing possible. And so we are, you know, I'm probably preaching to the choir a bit here, because I think there's a lot of like athletes and people that look after themselves, but you know, it is really important that we talk about periods, and it is really important that we don't feel shame, because we're not supposed to, you know, we're not supposed to talk about periods when we get them. We're not supposed to talk about periods when we stop getting them. You know, there's all this shame attached to it. And I just noticed, I've been looking at some of the Q&As, and I noticed, and someone said, what proportion of this webinar is female? And I noticed the one sort of negative question came from a man saying, do you condone littering on a race course? And for some reason, it's okay to throw, like, it's okay on a race course for people to throw their water bottles everywhere. But women, you know, if men had periods, the issue of what to do with sanitary protection on a race course would be, you know, it would be sorted. If men had periods, the height of period technology would not be a piece of cotton wool with a string attached to it. If men had periods, there would be television shows on every week where they were trying out period technology. It would be like Top Gear. Jeremy Clarkson would say, this week, you know, this is the thing. And we're just getting to the stage where we have things like Thinks pants, where we can, you know, and we're, you know, we're still having to talk about contraception. We're still, this is bonkers, and we shouldn't be ashamed of our bodies and how, and also it's like that thing of like, oh, she's just hormonal. Like, right, when we're talking about periods, she's just hormonal. No, I'm not just hormonal. Hormones are the strongest chemicals known to humankind. Why am I supposed to just ignore the ones that are female? Fuck you. Sorry, I'm so sorry. But this does get me. And so, you know, it is amazing that we're having this conversation, but we shouldn't, you know, I won't be ashamed because I bleed once a month and I don't, you know, it's that South Park.
It's a sign of health as well, though. Like, it actually is. And like, I think you're totally right. Like, we should be proud of the fact that we're women, and that, you know, our bodies are just, hormones change. Like, oh, big deal. Like, it's not a big deal. And I actually think we can use this, like, again, like, part of our like Fitter Women program is all about using the hormonal fluctuations to almost have like an ergogenic aid. So it's like, actually, let's use these really proactively, and let's work with them, not like fight against them, and embrace them. Because okay, you bleed once a month, but that's kind of just a side effect of the hormonal changes. Hormones are just constantly changing, which is like really unique for a woman. It's just that historically we've been really embarrassed by that, but we shouldn't be.
No, it's not embarrassing. I mean, as I say, again, we just wouldn't exist if your mother didn't have a menstrual cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
And someone just said in the chat, I think it's one of our superpowers. And I do think we need to flip around the way we view our bodies and ourselves, and you know, and it's like, it's just blood, and we're all made up of blood. And,
yeah.
You know.
But also, Bryony, you said that like in elite athletes, maybe like they already talk about it, or it's not so relevant for in terms of like just breaking the kind of idea of the curse. I'd say it really is. Like the crazy thing is that there's, you know, over the last maybe 2 years, I think obviously Heather Watson started the conversation going, but then even now, like across some sports, they still don't talk about this at all. And you think like it's having like fundamental negative effects on certain people in terms of symptoms, but why don't we talk about it and then we can manage that?
What, Georgie, I'm really interested in, and I know that there's some people that have asked it in the box, like what evidence is there that you perform better at certain parts of your menstrual cycle, or that you are better at, like, I always hear like, oh, you've got your period, go and do some yoga. I'm like, I don't want to do any yoga. I want to run 10 miles. I don't want to do the yoga.
Yeah.
Like what, you know.
And I think it's funny that you say that, and also aligned with your bleeding or menstruating when you're running the marathon. Like, I really believe that if you manage your cycle well, so if you don't have excess symptoms, so you manage the symptoms, and I think you can manage symptoms unless you have like a really bad underlying menstrual dysfunction, then you can do anything any day. Like, I don't think our menstrual cycle in our heads should be a barrier to anything that we're doing. Some people, everyone's cycle is different as well. Everyone responds differently to the changes in hormones, and I think it's all about working with your own body to work out, okay, well, maybe if I do feel a bit more tired when I'm just about to start menstruating, then maybe this exercise might be better than another exercise. But in elite athletes, like, they need to be able to train, race, perform on any day. So I think I really don't believe in putting a stigma against like, oh, you're menstruating, oh, watch out, you can't run a marathon today.
I do, sorry to interrupt, I do find as I've got older, and I suppose as I approach the end of my life in periods, so to speak, my periods have got a lot heavier, and that does make, and a point, in case of an example of that was that when we did the underwear run last year, I remember like being in my underwear on the start line and having to go to the little portaloos and empty my moon cup like every 10 minutes. It was so heavy, and it is really difficult, isn't it? If you're someone that gets very heavy periods, you know, that is like 2 or 3 days of your month where you are kind of like slightly
inhibited. Yeah, definitely. And I think like there is so a lot of the work I would do is look at how to manage symptoms proactively. So I feel like let's try and avoid the use of taking like medication or having to use hormonal contraception. Like, how can we manage symptoms naturally? So for example, the menstruation, like the actual menstruation process, is associated with like increased levels of inflammation. So there's more inflammation that occurs in your body when you're menstruating, and it's that much greater if you're a heavy menstrual bleeder. So say you are heavily bleeding, so actually looking at ways to manage, like to help reduce that inflammation, would be really proactive. So for example, looking at what your diet's like, so avoiding like life choices that could be pro-inflammatory. So for example, reducing intake of processed foods, or trying to focus on getting like your 7 portions of fruit and veg in.
What do you mean I can't eat cake?
I mean, I never say never. I think there's times in your menstrual cycle where it would be better to eat cake than other times, or you go for like a healthier cake. And it's not all about being healthy, it's just about being smart with your hormones. Like, we know that if, like, imagine when your hormones, so to menstruate, so to bleed, hormones like estrogen and progesterone, the 2 major hormones that we talk about, they kind of decrease. So they're high in your body in the second half of your menstrual cycle, they're high, then they decrease. And when they decrease, there's this release of these hormone-like substances called prostaglandins. I won't go too sciencey, but they result in an inflammatory response. So they suddenly cause like an onset of inflammation in your body. And for some people that can cause symptoms. So for example, like menstrual cramps, lower back pain, they can occur partly as a result of this inflammation, like menstrual migraines, that, you know, all of the symptoms, all of the hundreds of symptoms that people experience. So one big thing I've been doing with the athletes I've been working with is looking at how we can manage the inflammation, for example. So increasing anti-inflammatory foods, or like changing behaviors to really focus on reducing that inflammation. So decreasing caffeine intake, decreasing, I mean, not that they're really alcohol consumers, but for example, you'd want to decrease your alcohol intake. You'd want to really focus on that's where you want to eat as healthily as you can. You want to have
So I'm not allowed to drink caffeine. Oh, I mean, I don't drink alcohol anymore, but but like, I want to know, what are anti-inflammatory foods? I've got my notebook, everybody.
Oh, amazing! Me too. So like your nuts and seeds, they'd be good. Fruit and veg, like you want to throw in as many antioxidants as you can.
Are there any particular like fruits and vegetables that are like
I mean,
the best anti-inflammatory fruit or vegetable that ever existed?
I mean, I feel like regardless, like any fruit and veg are great, but if you can get some like berries in there, some green leafy veg, maybe chuck in some people love things like avocado, which is like a good source of a healthy fat as well, which would be great. Grapes, like anything and everything really, fruit and veg wise. Smoothies are a great option. Alongside that, oily fish, healthy like oils, cooking with oils. But it's not all about like, okay, now I've got to eat clean. It's just about being proactive, I would say. And just like, that's the problem, is that's when women typically have an increased appetite, so they experience more cravings. So you want your chocolate, you want your biscuits, you want your cake, you want something like salty or sugary, but actually that's in a way the worst thing you can do, because that can make the whole thing way worse. And you want to have like whole grains as well to help from a fiber perspective, because it's really important to eat fiber at that time as well. I could talk about this forever, but there's more information in the app actually.
Because that is that thing about like, I get in the run up to my period coming, I get ravenous, like, and then the moment it comes, I don't crave, and like I'm just like, oh, I'll just eat, like, about to eat normally, and then the 2 days before I just want to eat like all the burgers, I mean, I'm not an elite, I know this is going to surprise you all, everyone, to learn I'm not an elite athlete,
but you're still an athlete. You're like, I really think the word athlete, anyone who exercises, you're an athlete, and you're a woman, and
anyone who can run a marathon is an athlete.
Yeah. And athletes are women.
Yeah, but what I mean is that like those 2-3 days before a period, I'm like, all the burgers, get in my stomach, get in my belly. Yeah. And what is the cause of that?
So research suggests that your like basal metabolic rate can increase just before you start. So when in the second half of your menstrual cycle, basically, and also your ability to control your blood sugar levels also changes. Thing is, like, as you were already highlighting, like, men have been prioritized in a number of different aspects of our lives in the past, and one big thing was research. So way back, around the time of the First and Second World War, it was decided that all research should be done on men. There was concern over damaging potentially unborn fetuses in women, and researchers didn't want to affect reproductive organs for further down the line. So it wasn't until the 70s, like the 1970s, that there was this appreciation that actually women and men are different. But all through that time, all this research was being done on men. And then when you realize that women and men are different, you then have to factor in that women are more variable because of their hormones change more in women than men. So that makes doing research really, really hard. So we're still trying to catch up in terms of our understanding of what is happening in a woman's body, and we're really, really trying. And I think now there's like a big global push to really like better understand females. But from our understanding, we think that cravings are caused by changes in blood sugar levels, which typically happen in the second half of your menstrual cycle, so as you enter that premenstrual phase, and also that your basal metabolic rate can change. So you get the amount of food you need to like fuel yourself is increased in the second half of your menstrual cycle. But often people then crave, because you kind of just eat in a pattern maybe of what you would eat every day, any day. Suddenly you're premenstrual and you're eating what you normally eat, and you're like starving because that just doesn't do it. So that's when you start craving sugary things or salty things or takeouts, or just like you hear such interesting like ranges of what people crave, but that is the primary reason. So actually it's not a case of saying, oh my gosh, I can't have that chocolate even though I really, really want it. I think your body's telling you it needs something. It's just trying to catch it before it's too late, where you then just want the sugar. So I always say, try and like fuel regularly throughout the day, and try and get, like, as women, we're not very good at having enough protein. So try and get like protein and carbohydrate in together just to keep our energy levels like topped up, so you don't have those dips. And the dips can also affect your mood. So it's all kind of spiral. It's all very linked.
It's amazing the amount of questions we're getting. There's a lot of people that are asking, how do you talk about periods? And particularly thinking about coaches that may be working with young girls, but also one coach saying her sort of teenage athletes that she's working with don't want to talk about periods. So Bryony, you did such a brilliant rant there. Well, no, it wasn't a rant, it was a speech about periods and the importance of them. What would you say to people who are saying, oh, I don't know how to talk about periods, either as an adult or as an athlete?
Yeah, I mean, I do you know why that's tripped off the tongue? It's because last year I wrote a book called You Got This, which was a mental health book for teenage girls, and it was basically all the things I wish someone had told me when I was like 12 or 13. And you know, I think it is difficult because, yeah, people don't want to talk about this stuff, but I think the more you can just normalize it in yourself, like as an adult, the more that you watch your and I talk about this in terms of, you know, I get a lot of questions. I get a lot of women email me and say, I'm really worried about my teenage daughter. How do I instill confidence in her? And I'm like, the way you instill confidence in her is by instilling confidence in yourself, because you can say all the things to them that you want, but if you don't believe it, but if you don't show it yourself, then they aren't gonna, you know, there's no hope in hell. I remember, you know, a great example of this was last year. I you know, before the coronavirus lockdown, I used to take my daughter swimming every weekend to our local swimming pool, and remember we were in the changing room and I was like, oh, my boobs are so big, and my daughter, who was 6 at the time, said, no mummy, your boobs are exactly as they're supposed to be. We're all born as we're supposed to be born. And I was like, amazing. And I was like, where did she get that from? And then I realized it's because that's how I normally talk. And I think you've got to, you know, normalize this stuff in yourself. And, you know, it is, of course it's difficult, but like if you try and make it feel as much as possible like it's just life, and it happens to everyone, and it isn't really that embarrassing. And the once you've spoken about it, it isn't, you know, once you get over that hurdle. And I always think in life, and this goes for everything, but the thinking about doing the thing is always worse than the doing the thing, right? Like that. And that goes for anything. That goes from like doing a race, or, you know, or having a difficult conversation. So, you know, and I do think it is really important that we do talk about this stuff more, because as I say, it does instill a sort of shame in women at a very early age, which is very difficult for people to shake off. And
we should be proud of being women. Like it you know, I guess, Anna, if you were to ask me, which I don't know if you were going to, but I'm going to answer anyway. I think I believe one of the biggest problems is education. Like, how can you talk about something you don't really understand? And I think particularly for male coaches out there, it's really, really difficult, because
that's what I was going to ask you about.
Yeah, how do they broach this subject when actually they haven't really had education on it, and it's not really like part of most coaching programs. It's not really part of that at school. I mean, I barely even remember this being mentioned at school for me, and I just think, well, actually times need to change. Like it is normal, and I think that's one big thing that we're working on, and I feel really strongly about, because I think particularly, I mean, female coaches as well, because we know loads of people just don't understand the menstrual cycle. It's not a normal conversation, as we've said, and it's not I doubt it's on like biology syllabuses at school anyway, or if it is, you probably just don't really concentrate. So I really believe like there needs to be a cultural shift in education, not to again like promote what we're doing, but we do have a coach platform, which I've felt like I feel really proud of that, because I think that is such a good resource to facilitate that conversation, and basically our app links up to a coach platform, and so it sort of seamlessly allows the conversation without it like, and that's not like taking away the fact that conversation needs to be had, but it just means that you don't have to have it every single day. Oh, what symptoms you're experiencing today, or where are you in your menstrual cycle? It just makes it a bit more seamless. But obviously that's not for everyone, and not for people who necessarily have not everyone has a coach. But I think even at an like a way younger kind of grassroots level, and just for everyone out there, I think it's so important that people go away and try and like understand this area, because it is a nuance of being a woman. But as you said, like 50% of the population are women. We've actually just launched a podcast, the Female Athlete podcast, to try and help again, like just go down the education route. I know women in sport have loads of resources as well. So I just think the more we can educate people, the more we can normalize it, the more amazing role models out there can like keep talking about it, the better.
I also think we should talk about like the different types of sanitary protection there are. And when I was a kid, there was basically sanitary towels and tampons, and that was it. And now just so like it's a bit like I've seen a few people mention like the eco cup, like the moon cup has been revolutionary for me. Like it literally is just wonderful, and like the lack of waste and the and actually I feel I know my body and like what it's doing. Like I can see, do you see what I mean? Like I can sort of see the stage of the period I'm in, without going into whatever, from the blood and you see the advertising for things like that. I also use period pants, and it's so wonderful that we have all this stuff, and they're, and you go into Boots and they're not hidden at the back of the.
Yeah. I think times are definitely changing. They just need to keep changing. But I think you're right, Bryony, actually, because speaking about like the gore, as people would call it, like actually blood is really normal. Like if you have a cut somewhere else on your body, it doesn't like, it's not deemed to be disgusting, is it? But it's just like, because of where it comes from, it seems to put this like fear of God in everyone when it shouldn't.
Well, there was a comment on one of the comments that came flying in about young athletes being really worried about having leaks during competition, or what happens if something like that. And I remember a swimmer saying to me once that they used to do period checks in the changing room, because obviously they're in quite sort of small things, and then they just check whether you could see any blood or whether a string was hanging out from the tampon. What can we do to kind of embolden really young women and girls, who are struggling with these kind of issues?
I mean, you do want to go, Georgie?
I was going to say ban white shorts and white skirts would be a good start.
Oh, tennis.
That's something that kills me. Like my PE shorts are white. Like that's just child abuse.
But also, like it's like, again, it's like Georgie, you just said, if someone cut themselves, you would be like, I remember having to. I was like bleeding quite heavily before this 10K, and I remember my friend Jada just being like, right, okay, we're just gonna have to. It was, it was just everywhere, and I think it's a bit like, I think as a woman, once it's happened, you're just like, it's just your body, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And if someone wants to point it out or laugh at it, then that's sad on them. Like, how sad that they think that is like something funny or something to laugh about, and just be like, dude, I'm a woman, I bleed once a month, like that's what happens to me, and it's a little bit sad that if you're taking the pee out of that, do you know what I mean? Because what does that say about you? That's the kind of way I approach these things. Like, accidents happen. Accidents? It's an accident, it's just your body.
It's normal. Yeah. I do think, as you said, Bryony, like raising like kids' awareness about, okay, you don't just talk about periods in biology, you talk about, well, these are the different types of sanitary products, like, so they actually, like, it isn't just a graph on the wall, even though I do love my graph. It is the actual, like, the reality of it. And yes, some days you are going to be heavier, and like, ideally, I mean, I feel like you also don't want to set a kid up to like have a complete nightmare. But for example, I remember at my school when kids wouldn't swim when they were on their period, and it was almost like their mother would pre-prepare a note to say, you're not going to swim. That's ridiculous. It shouldn't be like that.
And also, I always find swimming doesn't really, you know, the flow of the water sort of stops the blood. But also, I think that there is a thing that schools really have to be like in on this. So like, I hear, you know, I've heard a lot of schools that have, sanitary bins that just don't have sanitary bins in the girls' toilet. You know, primary schools need to get in, because you will have girls in year 6 who will be getting their periods. You know, you may not, you know, it may not be something that you want to confront, but it's there. And
you should confront it. Like, I think kids should be educated from like 8, like they should know, and boys as well.
My daughter, I really think that's important. All of us. Last year I went to Uganda with Save the Children to do a series of podcasts from some of the women in one of the big camps out there, and refugee camps, and I did one with a 16-year-old girl, and she was teaching other girls how to make their own sanitary protection. And I'd sort of assumed, in that sort of like white patronizing or awful way of mine, that like they'd be really funny, you know, they wouldn't be talking about periods. And of course, actually, that's one of the first things they do. They educate the boys, they educate the girls, and they're like, yeah, it's your period, you're going to get it. And, you know, it's a very normal part of life. And then that approach, I realized when I was interviewing these girls, is what we need here. You know, we have a lot to learn from cultures like that, where they just, it's just life. So just get on with it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that schools really need to be better at this. But also, you know, I think culturally we just need to be better at
not having this historical opinion of like stiff upper lip British people who don't want to talk about it.
And also, like, just make it nicer for women when you go to the people are mentioning this, like just like, if I'm going to a public toilet, like, it can be gross. It can just be gross. Like, they don't get cleaned. They don't, you know, they don't have a bin at all, as someone just said in the comments, you know. And it's like, come on, just make it a bit, put really nice little sanitary bags in. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know, this is a crazy idea. Why don't you provide some sanitary protection that I could just use?
Oh, they do in Scotland. Like, that's amazing. Like in Scotland, they've had, over the last like couple of years, they've had like a massive change to like address period poverty. And I think, again, that normalizes the area. I think in the UK we really, well, not in the UK, Scotland is in the UK, in England we really need to do that as well.
We ran a story during the Rugby Women's Six Nations that some of the teams didn't even have sanitary bins during international games, which I just found particularly shocking. Unbelievable. We've only got about 10-15 minutes left, and there's so many questions, there's no way we can possibly get to. One thing I'd love to do before we finish is just to go through some of the misinformation out there, because even as adults, I think we still hear so many things that definitely aren't true. I mean, I asked Georgie the other day, is it true? Because I heard another adult who I really respect and is a brilliant professional say that if your children drink organic milk, then they won't go through puberty earlier. Or if your daughters drink organic milk, they won't go through puberty early enough and get their periods early. And Georgie said that's bollocks.
Well, I mean, like, this is definitely not my research domain, obviously, but cow estrogen, human estrogen, enough estrogen in a cow. I mean, more research is clearly needed in this area, but I would prioritize focusing research in other areas, would be my diplomatic answer.
What about going upside down? Because you often hear yoga teachers say, oh no, don't do that if you're on your period.
Yeah, I mean, unless suddenly your menstrual blood flow is gonna come out of your mouth, like I don't really, I don't think that's a problem. Like I just, it's so funny. But in terms of Bryony, actually, what you said earlier, like I don't see any realm of life apart from obviously the potential for heavy blood loss, but I don't see that the menstrual cycle should hold us back in anything we do, as long as, again, like we're proactive, we track our cycles and try and do everything we can. So definitely I would say gymnasts are okay to do a handstand at certain times of their menstrual cycle, or throughout their menstrual cycle, in fact.
But being upside down is good for you, isn't it? I've got one of those. Oh, sorry. I sound like a Dalek suddenly.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know what's happened there.
It's Zoom's way of shutting me up.
Zoom is zoomed out of. No, it's
so can I ask a question? Sorry, I'm not supposed to be asking the questions, but what about soya milk?
And what?
Your menstrual cycle, does it? I've read somewhere that it like lengthens it or shortens it or messes around with it.
That's definitely nothing I've ever heard of.
Okay.
I guess
I'm sure. Honestly, it's a thing. I've read it, but if it's
okay. I think like the problem is, as I said before, like it's so there's not like research is constantly needed to understand every little like nuance of things that can affect the menstrual cycle, and everyone responds a bit differently. Someone else has actually said, I heard about that as well. It's not something I know about, but I will look it up and I will let you know.
It's so interesting. You said that like it started in the First World War, that you test things on only on men, and but it's incredible that in the year 2020, I mean, there was something I read recently that a lot of the coronavirus vaccine tests, they've only wanted men,
yeah,
which is like, what about me? Like, what?
Because your hormones are changing, women's hormones are changing so much. Like every day, your hormonal like profile is a little bit different. So actually, your body is in a slightly different state throughout, say, a 28-day period. Excuse the pun. That can affect the way you might respond. So, for example, if you are taking or trialing the vaccine on day 1 of your menstrual cycle when your hormones are really low, that might be different from day 20 when your hormones are really high. So it's so hard to do research in women because you have to test them so much more regularly, which is more expensive. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Well, because presumably they're making the vaccine for us too, or is it just
so, wouldn't you? Yeah.
just a vaccine for men? Because like there's a real problem there.
There is a problem, and there won't be any kids in the future if that does happen.
And you won't have most of the frontline workforce either, because most of them are women.
That's
too.
very true. Yeah.
Let me just, there's so many questions, it's going to be absolutely impossible to answer all of these. There's a lot of body shaming around periods and people reporting about anecdotes, which is really, really sad. What else have we got? Cultural perceptions of being on a period as being dirty, worrying about leaks, that seems to be a big issue for many people. There's a question about endometriosis and PCOS, which is something we've only just started talking about more in elite sport, certainly with the likes of Eleanor Barker sharing her story and saying it was years before she was diagnosed. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, Georgie?
So endometriosis is a condition where like the lining of your uterus basically grows out of just your uterus. So they call it IV typically because it means that the uterus lining can spread throughout your whole body, like even in your nose. It's extremely, extremely painful because obviously you experience pain when you menstruate in that specific, typically like uterus area. But when you've got endometriosis, the pain can be throughout your whole body. And also we know with endometriosis, this inflammation I was talking about is like that much worse. So for someone who has normal relatively normal menstrual cycles, or atypical as we would call them, say their level of inflammation is sort of that, and then endometriosis could be like way higher. So for people with endometriosis generally, like there's loads of different options. Like you can go down the hormonal contraception route to help manage it. You can also go down the route of like using extreme medication to help treat it. But also I think like diet and this like anti-inflammatory lifestyle is more important than anything really. And I'm always really reluctant to push or encourage people to go down the medication route unless really necessary. So I would say look at like an anti-inflammatory lifestyle behaviors really as a first starter. Like I know some people try vegan diets, not that I'm specifically advocating that, but like plant-based diets can much more like anti-inflammatory. So I would suggest that. I also think in terms of this current scenario, like obviously where the potential for stress to be that much higher, like that is going to be that much higher in people with endo. So yeah, I think again, being proactive. The other thing just to say on endometriosis is massively underdiagnosed as a condition. So if anyone thinks that they might have that, so they have extreme symptoms, so like premenstrual syndrome times 10 kind of thing, then they should definitely get it checked out to see whether they actually do have endometriosis.
And I heard it takes on average 7 years to get diagnosed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a classic sort of women being left behind in the health department.
100%, yeah. And again, like fight your battle. Like if you know, bang the drum of being a woman and actually like, I really want to get this looked at.
Unbelievable. We've got 5 minutes left, and I feel it would be remiss not to mention some of the issues that women are facing in lockdown, just to sort of, as we go towards the end. I've got friends who are, you know, been trying to get pregnant. All the IVF has been taken away because obviously the health system has to focus on coronavirus, and that's a really difficult position I think for women to be in. So they're trying to get pregnant without any assistance and feeling more stressed than ever, and their cycles are going haywire. What should they be doing, or what can they do to help in this situation, Georgie?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously IVF is like one specific case, like women who are currently undergoing IVF. I think firstly, as we were saying at the beginning, like an appreciation that actually this situation is not normal, but we have to normalize it. I think the more stressed you get about anything right now, the more it's going to affect your body and the health of your body. Like one big kind of take home for me, or thing that message I wanted to deliver today was like, actually it's okay to not be okay in this situation, but actually to try and use this time to try and understand your own body and actually try and manage like stress, for example. So for someone undergoing IVF, like do everything you can to look after yourself. So try and sleep well, prioritize yourself. So now obviously today people in the UK can exercise more than once a day, but actually you need to build in me time for you, because that's where your body can kind of like do whatever it wants to do, be happy. Like that's where you get your endorphin, like your happy hormone kind of kick. And it's really important to prioritize me time as much as you can, especially if you're homeschooling or trying to do everything else that you suddenly realize you need to do, or work full time alongside that. But I think the more you can eat well, sleep well, just look after yourself, do some exercise, like obviously not overdoing it right now, but just do everything you can to support your immune system and your general health and well-being. And I think actually that message should go right the way from you know, someone who might exercise every once in a while. That's also the message that I'm delivering to elite athletes. Like obviously there's a coach and a support network going on there, but regardless, like across the board, that's what I really believe women need to be doing at the moment.
I've got to ask you the question that's just come in. Does chocolate increase period blood flow?
Again, that's an interesting one. So first thing I would say actually is depends on the type of chocolate. Now, I wouldn't say that there's a study out there.
Depends on the type of chocolate.
So, like, there's a theory here. There is no scientific study that I am aware of that has been conducted to look at chocolate and the menstrual cycle. But so chocolate can have like pro-inflammatory potential. Not dark chocolate. Dark chocolate would be a good one. But milk and white chocolate, I would say, I mean, you'd probably have to eat extreme amounts, but it is a processed food, relatively speaking. Like, there is some research around dairy and menstrual blood loss. So, I mean, like, really, no, but at the same time, I wouldn't eat it in excess, particularly if you've got bad symptoms.
That's interesting. We've only got a couple of minutes left. Bryony, I feel like a lot of the advice that Georgie has given us is just about trying to maintain a sense of sanity and not get too stressed. I mean, how do we do that as women?
Okay, well, I think the thing I've learned in life, and I've got quite a lot of experience of mental illness and addiction and alcoholism and stuff like that, and I think the best thing I have discovered over my many years in treatment and all the rest of it, and working in the mental health community, is that you, like what Georgie was saying about me time, and like feel the pain, feel whatever you're going through, accept, at the end of the day, go and sit down and cry if you have to. I think when we are growing up, we're taught that happy is the goal, and if we're not happy, then we're failing. And that's not true. If you're feeling sad and you're feeling angry and you're feeling all those things, they're very, very normal things to feel, and you're human. And so feel them in a kind of safe way, I guess. Don't beat yourself up for feeling stressed. Do you know what I mean? Like that thing of like, oh, and remember those things like compare and despair, and just look after yourself. Like, we only get one life, and we're talking about the menstrual cycle, but the chances of any of us existing are something like 1 in 10 million to the power of 10 million something. So, like, first of all, your biological parents have to like meet. If your biological parents had sex, or that your dad had come like 5 seconds earlier or 5 seconds later, you could be a whole different person, right? So let me just quickly tell you this, right? So like, first, the millions of sperm are released into the biological woman's body, and then because women are clever and they don't want any old sperm, they start to kill the weak sperm with the acid, right? Georgie's like, no, bro, this is not what happens. But anyway,
I'm just letting you roll with it. It's okay.
And then they have to go, the sperm have to go like upstream, like it's like the sperm equivalent of like an Iron Man, right? And then they have to like punch through the equivalent of like me punching through the wall here to get to you. And that's if an egg is there, because an egg is only there for like a couple of days of the calendar month, right? And then they get to the fallopian tubes. Do they go left? Do they go right? Half of them have already made the wrong decision, right? So they're gone. There's 500,000 versions of you gone, right? And then if they made the right decision and they go up the fallopian tube and the egg is there, the egg is then surrounded by white blood cells behaving like nightclub bouncers, like, you ain't coming in. So if the sperm managed to fertilize your biological mother's egg, and then the pregnancy managed to go to full term, and your mother managed to give birth to you, your biological mother managed to give birth to you, and we know that like the doctors say that the most dangerous day of your life is the day you were born, okay? And then every single day since then, you have managed to stay alive, okay? And there's a global pandemic going on right now. You are a miracle. Yeah. You are amazing.
That's such a good way to look at it.
Do not spend any time beating yourself up for the way that you feel or feeling ashamed of you, because you are absolutely fucking brilliant.
That's such a good way to look at it, actually. Like, I mean, I guess we're also like in our little worlds where we don't think about that kind of thing. So actually, that is amazing. We also do have loads of tips in our Fitter Women app. So on a more, I guess, like daily practical level, we do have them as well.
But I think on a daily practical level, I might clip up Bryony's speech just then, and maybe play it every
I feel
morning.
like when I brush my teeth in the morning, that would be great.
I just think everyone is wonderful, and you know, and I just think that we should all be proud of ourselves, and we should all be honoring ourselves. And these are things that if you'd asked me to say them 3 years ago, I'd be like, that is so cheesy, but it's true. And I've gone on a long journey of like accepting my body and accepting me for who I am, and you know, we only got one life, and it ain't that long, so we may as well, you know, use it, get on with it. You know, I'm sorry I went off on one there.
No, but it's so, like, honestly, you're so right. And I think it's just like embrace every day, isn't it? Like, there is that saying that embrace it every day like it's your last, and that sounds really morbid, but actually, like, you know, allow yourself to feel as you do, and don't try and pretend that you're okay if you're not okay, but also just be proactive in looking after yourself.
I think we're going to start to wrap up because it's gone past 6. We've got, exactly, there's children that need feeding, certainly in my house. We've got so many questions, so once we've finished, I'll work with Georgie to make sure that we answer all of the questions, if that's all right, Georgie. We'll find a way of getting back to everybody, and so many brilliant topics of conversation that people want to know about, whether it's body shaming, whether it's sort of technical stuff about their periods and training, whether it's PCOS and endometriosis. Really important stuff, so thank you so much to everybody who's commented. Big thank you to Bryony, you've been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, Bryony.
Well, thank you for having me. I mean, I don't think I've provided any like factual,
honestly, Bryony, like, if you could go around and speak to every school child, then I would be out of my job. Like, I think it would be, but that actually, like, I feel like we're just picking up on the fact that kids weren't educated, like, really.
No, I mean, I've had to teach myself this, and it's been a difficult lesson to learn. Put it that way,
hasn't it, for all of us?
Yeah. It's an ongoing journey.
Georgie, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us. As a woman who has published articles about periods but still habitually puts a sanitary towel up my sleeve when I go to the bathroom at work, I felt that this conversation was very needed.
Use a moon cup.
I love that bit that you focused on.
When we're allowed back into the Telegraph office, I'm going to come in, I'm going to hoist a boxed moon cup into your hands.
Can you sort of wave it around the sports desk first, just so everyone can get a good look?
Stand in the middle of the office and go, Anna's getting her first moon cup, everybody.
You know, before we go, can I ask you a genuine question? When you get the moon cup out, because you know what our toilets like are at work, you've got to come out the cubicle and then you've got to go to the sink. So do you just wash out? Do people just wash out their moon cup in the sink? I've never seen anyone.
No, you don't have to wash it. You just empty it and put it back in. It hasn't touched anything but your body and the air.
Your hands have to be clean, but other than that,
you wash your hands before you go in. But like, just not get, you know, like, unless you've gone and like wiped the moon cup in the toilet bowl, it's do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Anyway, I must go and feed my child now.
No, thanks for answering that question. Thank you very much, everybody, and hopefully we'll continue these conversations and keep writing and talking about periods. Thanks for joining us.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Do I just leave?
Yeah.
Yeah.